Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Rawls Group's Advancing Your Business, Your People, and Your Legacy podcast. My name is Kendall Rawls. I'm the Director of Development with the Rawls Group, your host. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Planning Post-Pandemic and What's in It for Me series. Kevin Gilbrath, a tax partner with Crowe, and our very own succession planners, Hugh Roberts and David Weaver, have been discussing the what ifs, when should, what planning, and why planning now is so important for business owners. The Rawls Group and the experts at Crowe collaborate and guide our clients through the succession planning process and balancing the 4 F's of feelings, family, finances, and the federal tax law. In this episode of the series, the discussion focuses on where should a business owner start to begin planning. Depending on one's comfortability with the topic, it can feel overwhelming and seem like a confusing, massive undertaking. Have no fear. Our expert panel provides key steps to help you get started. David, where should a dealer start to begin planning?
Sure, and I think Kevin did an awesome job of covering a lot of this in one of the earlier questions, but I think first is try to determine your long-range estate goals for your family and to do so without tax planning in mind. And the reason is that, like Hugh said, you don't want the tax tail to wag the dog. So what are your plans for transferring ownership of the business? Do you have family members who are currently active in the business or may plan to join at a later time? What about children who are not active in the business? And what are your plans for them within your estate? What's the timing for your retirement? How much income will it take to maintain your lifestyle? And what are the sources of that income? And we ask that because you don't want to be so tied to the business that you'll never lose control. If so, your successor and you will always be wrestling over control. So developing income sources outside of the business. These are the types of questions advisors can walk you through and will help frame the discussion. There's a myriad of issues to consider, including your estate circumstances, your net worth and income, the value of the business, and of course the current tax environment. And we can't plan for so much for the current year. If you're doing a transaction, then yes, we'll take that certainly into consideration. But we're really working more than anything else in 4-year election cycles, and policy cycles sometimes take longer than that. They sometimes take a couple of administrative cycles. So we really have to be looking at the long-term planning as opposed to short-term. And engage with an advisor and start thinking about these long-term questions. And once we understand where your vision is, where your values are, what motivates you, and what you see as the future for your family and your circumstances, puts us in an informed position to then be able to start working with you and putting a plan together.
Look for somebody who knows your business. Look for somebody who's worked with other dealers and also is recommended. Talk to your other dealer friends and find out who they trust and who they've had success with. But find that excellent team of attorneys, accountants, business planners, succession planners that you can trust, that are going to help you.
No question about it. And that experience in dealing in your industry certainly helps because there are some uniquenesses to the auto industry, and it's important to understand those, particularly as it relates to dealing with manufacturers and so forth. But there's just a whole lot of nuances there. I'd also say, in terms of starting, without a doubt, you need to make sure you know exactly where you're going. You hit on that perfectly, David. I think I like to, once we've figured out what it is that is your objectives and the goals and the vision and so forth that you want, then I think it's important to start with the what if questions. What if something happens tomorrow? What kinds of things do I need to have in place? So that would be pragmatically, you want to have will and trust planning. You want those primary documents in place. You want to have a plan in terms of the business. And so that would invariably lead to shareholder agreements or operating agreements, et cetera. Who's going to be able to run it? Do you have a successor? If you don't, are we going to sell? Those kinds of things need to be carefully laid out. If something were to happen prematurely to you, what do you have in place that will allow the business to continue? I think of one situation that was tragic. It happened when I was very early in the business. And this guy was king of the hill, and he had done phenomenally, et cetera. He had some health issues. And he basically said, I can't deal with this until I get my kidney transplant. And I said, are you crazy? You got to be, you don't even have a will. Oh, it's all right. Everything will be fine. Well, it wasn't fine. And he died literally of a heart attack the day after having the transplant. And his kids at the time were 18 and 15. And they were this close to having the opportunity that was phenomenal. And yet, basically, I met with the spouse 9 months later, and I said, I want to share with you some of the things that I had talked to him about, but we'd never moved forward. I couldn't get him to take action. And she said, well, I'm sure you have some pretty good ideas, but I'm probably no longer big enough to be your client. I said, how do you know? How do you know what's big enough to be my client? She said, well, I don't, but I do know that within about the next 2 weeks, I'm going to be selling out to my biggest competitor. And I'm pretty sure I'm selling for a fraction of what my husband would have told you it was worth. Well, I held up a piece of paper that reflected what the husband had told me it was worth, and she was selling for 1/12 the value. And the reason was real simple. This enormous business he had developed was dependent on himself and his one general manager. And those two guys were operating this tremendous business. And the competitor went in and took him away, made him a deal as too good to be true. And he was gone, and then the business collapsed, and it was ripe for the picking. So having the what if plan in place that says, should something happen to me today, do I have these basic things covered so that we don't have to be in that position of looking at a widow and saying, I'm sorry, we didn't get it done.
Thank you to our expert panel for sharing your insight on easy next steps to either start or ensure existing planning is taking advantage of every opportunity. This episode is the last of the 7-part Planning Post-Pandemic and Political Unrest, What's in It for Me series. If you have started here, we encourage you to go back to episode number 1, which focuses on what is changing in the areas of estate tax, and listen to the remaining episodes of the series focusing on advanced tax strategies. Do you have a question you want to discuss with an expert? Feel free to reach out directly to Kevin, Hugh, or David at the email addresses featured on the screen. Continue listening to the series now or come back later for more. Each topic featured may want you to learn something new.